You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle loss of control, that creeping sense that your life is a chain of reactions. You react to your boss, to your partner, to the world's noise, but rarely, almost never do you act. It's as if your will has been outsourced, your agency rented out to circumstances. Every decision you make is just an echo of something else, a stimulus, an emotion, a ghost. Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And if you listen carefully, you might realize your fate is just your fragmented psyche wearing different masks, pulling you in opposing directions while whispering contradictory commands. We live among fractured souls, but we also live as one. One part of you craves discipline, another sabotages it with apathy. One part desires love, another hides, terrified of being seen. You build plans in the morning and destroy them by nightfall. It's not hypocrisy, it's fragmentation. A splintering of the inner world so deep that the self becomes a battlefield, and every emotion, every thought, fights to rule the throne for a brief moment before another overthrows it. That's why you feel exhausted after doing nothing. You're not tired from life, you're tired from the civil war inside your mind. And this fragmentation makes you weak. Psychologically fragile, you become easy prey for louder personalities, for manipulators who sense your inner instability. They don't overpower you by strength, they simply occupy the space you've abandoned within yourself. You're not just dominated by them, you're dominated by the unclaimed parts of your psyche. Every time you suppress your anger, your need for control, your hunger for power or validation, those forces don't vanish, they retreat underground, waiting to rule from the shadows. That's why the idea of domination, especially psychological domination, feels so magnetic. It promises the reversal of power. It promises that you will pull the strings, that you will no longer dance to someone else's tune. And for a moment, that fantasy feels divine. But here's the trap. The more you chase external domination, the more you become enslaved internally. Jung saw this a century ago. He understood that the man who tries to control the world before mastering himself becomes a tyrant to others and a prisoner to his own unconscious. True domination, if we can even call it that, is not about others. It's about self-possession. It's about integrating the fragments of your psyche until you can finally sit upon your own inner throne without fear of rebellion. Jung called this process individuation, the art of becoming whole. It is not a conquest of others, but a reconciliation with the multiplicity within. That's what this journey is about. Not the cold art of manipulation, but the sacred art of integration, the transformation of chaos into sovereignty. Yet most people never reach that understanding. They settle for the counterfeit. The world sells them illusions of control wrapped in glitter and noise. The self-help industry tells you to fake it till you make it, as if authenticity were irrelevant. Social media sells you archetypes: the alpha, the seductress, the untouchable strategist, each one just another mask crafted to compensate for the inner void. These are performances, not transformations. They may make you look powerful, but they will never make you whole. Jung would call this an inflation of the ego. When the mask grows larger than the soul behind it, collapse is inevitable. You end up trapped inside your own performance, enslaved by the very persona you created to seem free. You aren't dominating anyone, you're simply serving your mask, maintaining its perfection, fearing the moment someone sees through it. The irony is brutal. You seek control to escape weakness, but in doing so, you become dependent on appearances. That's the difference between power and authority. Power demands proof, it needs others to confirm it. Authority requires nothing. It emanates quietly from within. Power manipulates. Authority magnetizes. The man of power plays games. The man of authority simply is. What the world calls domination is merely noise. Integration is silence. The silence of someone who has nothing to prove, because they already command themselves. And that's the dark truth at the core of Jung's philosophy. You cannot rule your world while you're ruled by the unknown forces within you. You are dominated by the parts of yourself you refuse to face, by the complexes that hijack your behavior, by the projections that turn ordinary people into gods or enemies in your mind. You think you are free, but you are just a marionette of unseen hands, your own hands, disowned long ago. So when we speak of the Jungian art of psychological domination, understand this: it is not a weapon you use against others. It is a weapon forged for yourself, a map of the unconscious, a process to reclaim your soul in fragments, to unify the kingdom within. Because until your inner parliament ceases its endless arguments, you will never speak with a single voice. But before you can master integration, you must first understand fragmentation. You must descend into the architecture of your own psyche, to see the invisible council that governs you in secret. The ones you call moods, habits, or triggers. They are not random, they are organized, alive, and very old. Each one fights for power, whispering its agenda, pushing you toward decisions you later regret. You think you are in control, but you are merely hosting a parliament of ghosts. And that's where we must begin. Because until you understand who inside you is speaking at any given moment, you will remain at their mercy. So stay with me. Let's walk into the chaos together. There's a darker truth beneath this. Every human mind is a parliament in chaos. Jung once described the ego as a frail center surrounded by countless subpersonalities, autonomous fragments of psyche he called complexes. You imagine yourself as a single unified being, but beneath the surface, you are a swarm of competing forces. Each complex has its own agenda, its own emotional gravity. You don't simply have complexes, they have you. They hijack your consciousness, wear your face, and speak with your voice. And when they are finished, they vanish back into the shadows, leaving you wondering, why did I do that? Think of the last time you exploded with anger at something small, or when jealousy consumed you, even though you knew better. In those moments, your rational mind was dethroned. The ego, the fragile spokesperson of consciousness, was pushed aside by an older, stronger presence. A part of you took command and acted as if it were the ruler. That is psychological possession. Jung wrote that complexes behave like splinter psyches, each one capable of taking over the whole system when triggered. You might call it being emotional, but it is closer to being possessed. Picture your inner world as a council room filled with ghosts. There's the critic, always pointing out flaws. The victim, replaying injustices. The seducer, the coward, the perfectionist, the martyr, each sitting at the table, demanding attention. The ego believes it governs this parliament, but in truth, it is more like a nervous moderator. When you lose control, it's because one of these inner figures has seized the microphone. And most of the time, you don't even notice. You call it having a bad day, but your bad day is often a hostile takeover. This is the first step toward true psychological domination, recognizing that your inner world is not one voice, but many. Until you identify who's speaking, you will never regain your throne. Ask yourself, who inside me just said that? Who's afraid? Who's angry? Every time you name the voice, you weaken its grip. Awareness is the first act of rebellion. But some members of this parliament are far more dangerous than others. They live in the basement of the mind, far from the light of awareness. This is the realm Jung called the shadow, the place where you've locked away everything you were taught to hate about yourself. Every impulse you repressed to be good, every forbidden emotion that didn't fit your image. Your aggression, your lust, your ambition, your hunger for power, all of it banished underground. You learned to fear these energies because they threatened your social mask, your persona. As a child, maybe you were punished for anger, so you buried it. Maybe you were mocked for confidence, so you learned humility to survive. But nothing you bury dies. It waits, and over time, your shadow becomes a silent general locked in the cellar of your psyche. The problem is that generals don't like being ignored. When you repress your power, it mutates. It becomes passive aggression, self-sabotage, anxiety. It leaks through in the most inconvenient moments, when you're tired, afraid, or trying to impress someone. The shadow doesn't want to destroy you, it wants recognition. It's the wild part of your nature that still remembers what strength feels like, but because you've disowned it, it now wages war from the dark. Think of the nice guy who secretly resents everyone, or the perfect woman who quietly crumbles under the weight of her own politeness. They've both locked away their rawness, their right to express, to desire, to say no. The shadow retaliates by making them weak when they need to be strong, or cruel when they need compassion. Every unintegrated part eventually becomes a saboteur. And here's the cruel twist. The people who irritate you the most often carry the energy you've buried. They are mirrors, forcing you to see what you refuse to claim. When you meet someone arrogant and you burn with anger, ask yourself, what exactly is being threatened? Maybe it's your own disowned confidence, projected outward and hated because it reminds you of what you lack. When you idolize someone, you're doing the same thing in reverse. You've projected your buried potential onto them. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The world outside is a theater where your inner conflicts are performed through others' faces. This is how you are psychologically dominated by the world through projection. Every time you project, you hand over power. The person who makes you feel inferior holds the part of you that doubts your worth. The person you obsess over carries the part of you that you've never dared to express. They become your captors because you gave them the keys. To reclaim those keys, you must retrieve your projections one by one. The process is uncomfortable, almost humiliating, because it reveals how little control you truly have. But it's also liberating. The moment you see that what you hate in others is actually your own shadow, the spell breaks. You stop fighting ghosts in the world and start integrating the forces within. Stay with me. This descent into yourself is not easy, but it's necessary. You've now seen the architecture of your inner chaos, the ego that thinks it rules, the complexes that truly do, the shadow that commands from the basement, and the projections that chain you to others. You are not fragmented by accident. You were trained to be fragmented. Society rewards masks, not wholeness. But beneath the mask, something ancient still remembers what sovereignty feels like. We have mapped the kingdom of disintegration. Now the question is, how do you reclaim it? How do you turn rebellion into order, fragmentation into power, chaos into command? That is the next phase. The alchemy Jung called the great work, the opus. It begins not with control, but with observation. Because before you can rule, you must see. The first movement toward inner sovereignty begins with differentiation, the radical act of seeing what you've mistaken for you. Most people spend their lives possessed by their complexes, mistaking every emotional surge for authenticity, every impulse for truth. But differentiation is the moment when consciousness steps back, when the observer emerges and says, wait, this voice inside me is not the whole of me. That's when domination begins to reverse. Imagine a storm passing through you, a wave of jealousy, fear, anger, shame. Usually you drown in it, speaking and acting from within the flood. But when you pause and simply observe, something extraordinary happens. The storm still rages, but you are no longer inside it. You're watching it from the shore. That's the birth of inner distance, the first breath of freedom. Jung compared it to standing at the edge of the unconscious and saying, "This is happening in me, not to me." That single distinction changes everything. In practice, this is the work of the shadow journal. When you feel possessed, when your voice sharpens, your patience dissolves, your chest tightens, don't rush to fix or suppress it. Instead, document it. Ask, who is speaking right now? Give it a name. The critic, the abandoned child, the avenger. Right from that voice, let it speak fully. What does it want? What does it fear? When you can articulate its narrative, you separate yourself from the character that once hijacked you. The simple act of naming the complex turns chaos into conversation. This is not repression, it's illumination. The moment you see a complex, it loses the ability to ambush you. You still feel its pull, but you recognize it as an energy within your kingdom, not a coup from outside. Jung called this the first movement of individuation, the differentiation of the ego from the unconscious. In that moment, you become the observer, the witness that stands above the battle, unshaken. But observation alone is not enough. To reclaim true power, you must move from witnessing your shadow to confronting it. Jung called this active imagination, a practice both mystical and psychological, where you descend into dialogue with the figures that live inside you. Close your eyes and picture the emotion that rules you most often. Maybe it's rage, maybe fear, maybe longing. Give it form. Let it stand before you. Speak to it as you would to another person. Ask it what it wants, what it's protecting, what it believes about you. At first, the figure might appear monstrous, sharp-toothed, defiant, hostile. That's because it's been imprisoned for years. You cast it into the basement of your mind, and now it doesn't trust you. But if you persist, if you listen instead of fighting, something begins to shift. The shadow reveals that it never wanted to destroy you. It wanted to serve you, but you refused its energy. Your anger was trying to defend your boundaries. Your envy was showing you what you secretly desire. Your arrogance was protecting a wound of inadequacy. Each monster becomes a messenger once you stop killing it. Imagine walking down into that basement again, this time not to suppress, but to speak. You find the general you locked away, your raw instinct, your untamed will. He glares at you, arms crossed, bitter from exile. You ask him, "What do you need from me?" He answers, "Use me," not recklessly but consciously. That's integration. It's not about turning darkness into light, but about making peace with it, learning to wield it with intention. You stop being afraid of your power because you've finally made it your ally. When this happens, emotional energy becomes usable. Anger transforms into assertiveness. Fear becomes foresight. Desire becomes drive. What once ruled you now serves you. The kingdom begins to unify, and this is the second act of self-domination. Not repression, but transformation. Jung described this as the assimilation of the unconscious contents. You don't destroy the shadow. You absorb its force. You become larger, more complete. But even now, danger remains. Because while you're reclaiming your inner world, the outer world still plays its games. The final form of domination comes not from within, but from without through projection. You may have made peace with some parts of yourself, but the psyche is clever. It continues to cast unclaimed aspects of you onto the world around you, turning people into symbols. The coworker who threatens your confidence, the lover who activates your wounds, the stranger who triggers inexplicable attraction, they're all mirrors. The world becomes a psychic battlefield disguised as human interaction. Every strong emotional reaction is a signpost pointing back to the self. When someone irritates you, ask, "What part of me are they carrying?" When someone captivates you, ask, "What gold of mine have I given to them?" Because here lies a brutal truth: whoever can trigger you, controls you. The person who can evoke rage or admiration or jealousy has a leash tied to your unconscious. The moment you retrieve that energy, when you recognize, "This power was mine all along," the leash disintegrates. That's why integration is the ultimate invisibility cloak. The more you own your shadow, the fewer hooks others can use to manipulate you. When someone insults you, it doesn't cut, because you've already faced your inner critic. When someone flatters you, it doesn't inflate you, because you've already embraced your worth. The world loses its power to dominate you, not because it's weaker, but because you are whole. This is the essence of Jungian domination. It's quiet, it's disciplined, it's unseen. You no longer need to prove or defend anything. Your presence speaks for you. People feel something they can't explain, a steadiness, a gravity. That is psychological authority. It doesn't shout, it simply is. If this is resonating, stay with me. The descent is almost complete, but the real work, the practical alchemy, begins now. You've seen the map of the unconscious, the parliament, the shadow, the projections. But how do you turn this knowledge into transformation? How do you live as an integrated being in a fragmented world? That's where the opus begins, the great work of uniting the self. There's still one more descent to make into the practice itself. Now we enter the heart of the work, the crucible where awareness becomes transformation, where understanding turns into embodiment. Jung called this opus contra naturam, the work against nature, against the easy drift of unconsciousness, against the comfort of fragmentation, because the psyche resists integration. It clings to its patterns like armor. To reclaim yourself, you must move with precision, not force. You're not conquering your mind, you're learning its language. The first practice, as you've begun to feel, is differentiation. But differentiation is only the doorway. The deeper path is to sustain that awareness even when emotion strikes. When rage or fear or desire rises, you don't say, "This shouldn't be here." You say, "I see you." In that moment, you become both the observer and the container. The emotion moves through you, but it doesn't define you. The complex still activates, but it no longer possesses you. Over time, this builds an internal space, an invisible throne from which you rule your reactions. You'll start noticing subtle shifts in your daily life. Someone criticizes you at work, you feel the familiar flare of defensiveness. But instead of snapping back or retreating, you pause. You sense the wounded one stirring within you. You breathe. You name it. The energy softens, loses its grip. That moment is microscopic, but it's revolutionary. Because self-mastery isn't built in grand epiphanies. It's forged in 1,000 moments of recognition, each one a reclaiming of power. Each one a vote for wholeness in that inner parliament. The second path is confrontation. Jung's method of active imagination is not mere visualization, it's dialogue with the soul. It requires courage, because you're inviting into awareness everything you once buried. It might come as an image, a voice, a feeling. It might take the form of a younger version of you, or a dark figure standing in silence. Whatever arises, let it speak. The shadow always begins as chaos, but beneath it lies meaning. When you ask your fear, "Why are you here?" it might answer, "To protect you." When you ask your anger, "What are you guarding?" it might say, "Your boundaries." Every emotion hides an intelligence, and every complex hides a truth. This confrontation turns enemies into allies. You learn to work with your darkness, not against it. Integration is not purification, it's partnership. The more you listen, the more the energy shifts. The shadow, once a monster, becomes a soldier. The complex, once an intruder, becomes a counselor. And little by little, the kingdom within stabilizes. You begin to act, not react. You speak from clarity, not compulsion. The world feels slower, but you feel sharper. The third path is retaking projection. This is where the alchemy extends beyond the self. The moment someone evokes a strong emotion, positive or negative, you use that as a mirror. Not to judge yourself, but to discover your missing pieces. The person you envy reveals your unlived potential. The person you despise reveals the part of you that you've disowned. The moment you realize this, you're no longer trapped in emotional chains. You reclaim the gold and the poison. For example, imagine someone at work who seems effortlessly confident. Their mere presence irritates you. The ego says, "They're arrogant," but the psyche whispers, "They have something you've denied yourself." Confidence is your own repressed royalty. The irritation is just your disowned king knocking on the door. When you own that energy, their presence no longer threatens you, it mirrors you. This is how projection becomes retrieval, how enemies become teachers. This is not an easy practice. The ego resists it with all its strength, because it thrives on opposition. It wants to be the victim of circumstance, the hero of its own story. But the integrated self no longer plays that game. It doesn't need validation from the external world. It doesn't need to be seen as good, right, or powerful. It simply is, and from that stillness real authority emerges. You'll notice something fascinating once you live this way. The manipulators, the energy thieves, the narcissists, they start to lose interest. Not because you're fighting them better, but because there's nothing left in you for them to hook onto. You've retrieved the projections they feed on. You've taken back the fragments they once exploited. You've become psychologically invisible. Their games no longer work because your boundaries aren't walls, they're presence. This is the quiet revolution. You stop broadcasting emotional frequencies of need and fear. You stop seeking control because you are in control. Your silence unnerves the disintegrated. Your calm feels like power to those still enslaved by chaos. And in a sense, it is power, but it's not domination. It's coherence. The more integrated you become, the more the world around you organizes itself to match your frequency. People trust your energy without knowing why. Situations bend toward your intent without resistance. That's not mysticism, it's the natural gravity of psychological wholeness. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation as both a personal and cosmic process. When you integrate the fragments within, you restore harmony to the greater pattern. You become an axis between conscious and unconscious, between chaos and order. You are no longer a pawn of the collective mind, you are its counterbalance. You rule your world not through dominance, but through presence. So understand this clearly. The Jungian art of domination is not a conquest of others. It's a coronation of the self. The crown is awareness. The throne is integration. The kingdom is your psyche. You've learned to differentiate, to confront, to reclaim. But there's still one more transformation to witness. The moment when all these parts coalesce into something larger than power. When the sovereign within you finally stands unopposed. When the voices fall silent and presence itself becomes command. That is the true dominion Jung pointed toward, not over men, but over the multitudes within. And when that happens, the world begins to shift in ways you can't quite explain. At this point, something irreversible begins to happen. The noise that once filled your mind, the inner critics, the defenders, the manipulators, the ghosts starts to quiet. It doesn't vanish. It simply recognizes its king. You no longer waste energy negotiating with your own mind. You are no longer at war with your instincts, your emotions, or your desires. You are no longer afraid of your depth. This is what Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You've done that. You've descended, confronted, reclaimed, and now you rise. Integration is not a single event, it's a state of being. You notice it in the way you move through life. You don't flinch at conflict, you read it. You don't chase approval. You radiate quiet certainty. Your words land heavier, not because you speak louder, but because they come from alignment. The people around you can feel it, they sense a coherence that doesn't need performance. This is psychological authority. It's the kind of power that doesn't beg to be seen. It simply exists like gravity. The fragmented notice it first. They can't name it, but they feel it. Something about you unnerves them, as if your silence exposes the parts of themselves they're running from. The manipulators sense no entrance point. Their tactics bounce off you like dull blades. The energy vampires find no opening to feed. You are no longer porous, no longer reactive. You've closed the loops where your power used to leak. To the unintegrated, you become unreadable, mysterious. To yourself, you become finally whole. This is the true meaning of psychological domination. Not the manipulation of others, but the cessation of manipulation altogether. No one can dominate you because there is no fracture for them to exploit. You've taken back every projection, every repressed instinct, every denied truth. The world that once provoked you now mirrors your inner stillness. The chaos that once ruled your emotions now answers to your awareness. And something even deeper awakens, the self. Jung saw the self not as the ego, but as the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious. When the ego finally bows to the self, the hierarchy of your inner kingdom aligns. The shadow takes its place as your strength, the complexes as your advisors, the emotions as your messengers. The inner parliament becomes a unified court, serving a single purpose: wholeness. You are no longer a person trying to become something. You are something remembering what it already was. You'll find that domination, in this sense, is indistinguishable from peace. The two are not opposites. They are the same vibration seen from different sides, because true authority doesn't need conflict. It doesn't force, it directs. It doesn't persuade, it embodies. When you are integrated, the universe stops feeling adversarial. The events that once felt personal now seem symbolic, like the psyche itself is speaking through the world, continuing your dialogue on a larger scale. That's why integrated people appear magnetic. They don't try to attract, they resonate. Their coherence draws life toward them. They no longer chase outcomes. They create alignment. Their inner stillness bends circumstance, just as a strong gravitational field bends space. And when people encounter that kind of presence, they feel both awe and discomfort, because it reflects their own fragmentation back at them. You've probably felt flashes of this already. The moments when you said no without guilt, when you walked away from drama without explaining, when you acted without hesitation and the world seemed to move in sync. Those are glimpses of integration. They feel powerful not because you controlled anything, but because for once, everything within you agreed. This is what it means to rule your world. Not to force outcomes, but to cease being ruled by fear, guilt, or impulse. When the internal ceases to betray the external, reality responds differently. You stop confusing control with dominance. You realize that control is a symptom of fear, but authority is the absence of it. And here lies the final paradox. Once you truly dominate yourself, the desire to dominate others dissolves. You no longer need to. The world obeys the same law you've mastered within. The more you integrate, the less resistance you meet. It's as though the external world recognizes your inner sovereignty and adjusts itself accordingly. You begin to understand that wholeness itself is a form of command. The universe responds to coherence because coherence is rare. Everyone chases power, but few dare to become whole, because wholeness demands sacrifice, the death of every false identity, every comfort of fragmentation. Yet the reward is beyond measure. A quiet mind, a clear heart, a will that moves without conflict. That is the final state of Jungian domination. Not a roar, but a silence so deep that everything bends to it. You move through life differently now. You don't react, you respond. You don't seek validation, you offer presence. You don't chase connection, you create it by existing authentically. The old fears lose their vocabulary. The old desires lose their grip. The child, the critic, the lover, the warrior, they all still live within you, but they no longer fight. They serve. And so, you no longer live as a puppet of unseen forces. You are both the puppeteer and the strings. You've become the center of your own gravity, and from that center, reality itself becomes negotiable. The journey ends where it began with the self. The one who once sought control now embodies it. The one who feared rejection now emanates authority. You no longer try to dominate, you simply govern. The fragmented world bends in quiet respect to those who have mastered themselves, because in their presence, all pretense collapses. So ask yourself, now that you've seen the architecture of power within, which part of you still whispers from the shadows? Which complex still pulls the strings? Which projection still holds your gold? Because the journey doesn't end with this understanding. It deepens with every act of awareness. Each recognition is a crown placed upon your consciousness. Each integration is another realm reclaimed within your kingdom. You rule your world not by conquering it, but by becoming it whole, indivisible, sovereign. The world doesn't need another ruler. It needs another integrated being. The question is, are you ready to become one?